I was in the middle of presenting a critical healthcare budget amendment when my assistant rushed into the chamber. One look at her face and I knew something was terribly wrong. "Sir, they're bulldozing Sunrise Haven. Right now. The residents are outside." I dropped everything and raced to my car. Sunrise Haven was the elder care home I'd built on my family property in honor of my parents. A place where 12 seniors without families lived together, sharing stories and finding purpose in their final years. When I pulled up, dust filled the air as a bulldozer tore through the east wing. Elderly residents huddled on the lawn, some in wheelchairs, others leaning on canes, confusion and fear on their faces. A woman in an expensive suit stood watching with a clipboard, talking on her phone. The HOA president who'd been complaining about our unauthorized facility for months. I slammed my car door. "Stop this demolition immediately." She turned, eyeing my formal attire. "This area is restricted. The board has determined this facility violates HOA covenants. There are people who need their medications inside," I said, watching an elderly man struggle to breathe without his oxygen machine. "The decision is final," she replied coldly. "This facility lowers property values." I pulled out my phone. "I need an emergency injunction at 1420 Sunrise Road. Illegal demolition in progress with endangered elderly." The bulldozer fell silent. The HOA president looked annoyed at my interference. "And who exactly are you to stop this?" she asked with a dismissive tone. I straightened my tie but said nothing. She had no idea who she was dealing with, and soon enough, she'd find out exactly what mistake she had made. The HOA president crossed her arms, still clutching her clipboard like a shield. "This enforcement action is completely legal. We've documented multiple violations." "Show me the paperwork," I demanded, moving toward the elderly residents. Many were shivering in the cool autumn air, having been rushed outside without proper clothing. I removed my suit jacket and placed it around the shoulders of an elderly woman whose thin hands trembled uncontrollably. The HOA president thrust several papers at me. I examined them quickly, noting the county letterhead that didn't quite match the official stationery I handled daily. After 10 years in state politics, I recognized a forgery when I saw one. "These are fake," I stated flatly. "This isn't an authorized county action." She pulled back the papers defensively. "We have every right. This facility violates our community standards. The noise, the ambulances at night, the eyesore of medical equipment visible from the street, it's destroying our property values." I turned my attention to the shaken residents. A nurse who had arrived for her shift was trying to organize them, checking who needed immediate medication. "Get blankets from my car," I told her, tossing my keys. "And call Dr. Morris at County General. Tell him we have a dozen displaced seniors, some with urgent medical needs." The bulldozer operator had climbed down from his machine and was speaking quietly into his phone, clearly sensing something wasn't right. I approached him directly. "Who hired you?" He pointed at the HOA president. "She did. Said she had all the proper permits. If there's a problem." "There's a very serious problem," I confirmed. "I suggest you document everything she told you before leaving." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. I had friends throughout county law enforcement. People who respected what I'd built at Sunrise Haven, people whose parents or grandparents had found community within its walls. The HOA president's confidence began to waver as 2 police cruisers pulled up, followed by an ambulance. "This is private HOA business," she protested as officers approached. "We have jurisdiction over this property." Sheriff Camden, whose mother had spent her final months at Sunrise Haven, took in the scene with a thunderous expression. "What in God's name is happening here?" he demanded. "Illegal demolition," I replied. "Using falsified permits. And endangered elderly residents." The HOA president stepped forward. "Sheriff, this facility violates multiple covenants. We've followed proper procedures." "Ma'am," Camden interrupted, "I don't see any county demolition permits. And I know this property isn't under your HOA jurisdiction." "Of course it is. All properties in this area." "Ma'am," Camden said more firmly, "Sunrise Haven was established before your development existed. It's grandfathered out of your HOA jurisdiction, which only covers the new Maple Creek estates." Her face registered shock, then uncertainty. She flipped through her clipboard papers frantically. "But our legal team said." "Your legal team was wrong," I said. "And now you've committed a serious crime." The HOA president's face paled as reality began to sink in. She glanced anxiously at the half-demolished building, then back at the growing number of official vehicles arriving at the scene. "This must be some misunderstanding," she stammered. "Our board received complaints and our documents clearly show." "Your documents are forgeries," Sheriff Camden said bluntly, examining the papers. "This isn't a county letterhead. It's not even a good fake." Emergency medical technicians were now moving among the elderly residents, checking vital signs and providing blankets. The 92-year-old veteran with oxygen issues was being helped into an ambulance. "Each of these residents is someone's parent or grandparent," I said, my voice tight with controlled anger. "People who built this community long before your luxury homes existed. And you've just destroyed their safety, security, and dignity." I walked toward a small group of confused seniors who were watching their home crumble before their eyes. Among them was Elaine, a retired elementary school teacher who had taught half the county's children over her 40-year career. Tears streaked her weathered face. "Where will we go?" she asked, clutching my arm. "All my photos of my late husband were inside. Our wedding album." Her words cut deeper than she knew. I had built Sunrise Haven precisely because I understood how it felt to see loved ones displaced and distressed in their final years. My own mother had bounced between inadequate facilities before I could create something better. Sheriff Camden was now reading the HOA president her rights while she protested loudly about calling her attorney. The bulldozer operator was giving his statement to another officer, looking increasingly worried about his own legal exposure. My phone buzzed with a message from my assistant at the Capitol. "Committee postponed the vote. Governor asking for updates. Media getting wind of story." I typed back quickly, "Elderly residents safe but displaced. Building partially destroyed. Criminal charges pending. Need emergency housing solution immediately." Her response came seconds later. "State emergency management team activated. Hotel rooms secured at Marriott. Transportation en route." I turned back to the residents, now gathered together near the sheriff's vehicles. Some were receiving medical attention, others simply sat in stunned silence. "Listen everyone," I announced, raising my voice to be heard over the emergency vehicles. "You're all going to be safe tonight. We've arranged comfortable hotel rooms until we can sort this out. No one will be separated. Your medications and immediate needs will be addressed." A spark of relief showed in some faces, though others remained confused or frightened. "But our things," one woman said softly. "My husband's military medals, our family Bible?" "We'll recover everything possible," I promised, though looking at the damaged structure, I knew many irreplaceable treasures were already lost. "And whatever can't be recovered will be replaced to the best of our ability." As transportation arrived for the residents, I pulled Sheriff Camden aside. "I want every possible charge filed. Elder abuse, fraud, destruction of property, falsifying government documents, unauthorized demolition. Everything." The sheriff nodded grimly. "Already on it. Judge Watkins is furious. His aunt used to attend the weekly card games at Sunrise Haven. He's issued an emergency order freezing all HOA assets pending investigation." I watched as the HOA president was placed in the back of a patrol car, her earlier arrogance replaced by panic. She still had no idea who I really was, just that her plan had gone catastrophically wrong. "One more thing," I added. "I want a full investigation into how this happened. Who forged those documents? Who on the HOA board approved this action? Was anyone in the county offices involved?" "We'll get to the bottom of it," Camden assured me. "This kind of thing doesn't happen in our county without consequences." As I helped the last resident into a transport van, I squeezed her hand gently. "I promise you this isn't the end of Sunrise Haven. It will be rebuilt better than before." What the HOA president didn't know yet was that she hadn't just bulldozed any elder care home. She had bulldozed a state senator's passion project, and I had the power, connections, and determination to ensure justice would be swift and complete. I spent the next several hours coordinating emergency care for the residents. The Marriott had quickly prepared a conference room as a makeshift medical station where doctors could assess everyone and ensure medications were properly administered. Hotel staff brought in extra blankets, toiletries, and warm food. My assistant arrived from the Capitol with 3 staff members, carrying laptops and phones. We set up an impromptu command center in a corner of the hotel lobby. "The governor called twice," she informed me quietly. "He's outraged and wants to know how he can help. Tell him we need expedited permits for rebuilding, and possibly emergency state funds to supplement insurance." "Already noted." Also, there's significant media interest. Local stations have footage of the demolition and the residents being evacuated. I glanced at the television in the lobby, which was indeed showing scenes from earlier that day. The caption read, "Elder care home illegally demolished, residents displaced." "No interviews yet," I said firmly. "The residents' well-being comes first. And I don't want to reveal my position until we have all the facts." The hotel manager approached, looking concerned but efficient. "Senator, we've arranged connecting suites for the residents who shouldn't be alone. Our staff will be available around the clock. Is there anything else they might need?" I thanked him, again struck by how quickly word had spread about my identity, even though I hadn't announced it publicly. Small towns had their own information networks. Sheriff Camden arrived with a thick folder of documents. "You're going to want to see this," he said, his expression grim. We found a quiet corner of the lobby. The sheriff spread out papers on a small table. "We've executed a search warrant on the HOA offices. Found these in their files." The documents revealed a deliberate conspiracy. The HOA had been planning this action for months. They had discussed waiting until I would likely be at the Capitol. They had researched how to forge county documents. Most damning of all, they had minutes from a closed meeting discussing how the Sunrise Haven property could be acquired cheaply after being condemned, then resold to a developer planning an exclusive clubhouse and spa. "This wasn't just about property values," I said, anger building as I read. "This was a calculated land grab." "That's not all," Camden added, pulling out more papers. "That HOA president, Karen Maxwell? Her husband's company is the developer who was planning to buy the land." The pieces clicked into place. "So she engineered this whole thing for personal profit." "Exactly. And there's something else. They specifically waited until today because they knew you'd be presenting the healthcare budget amendment." A chill ran through me. "How would they know my legislative schedule?" Camden's eyes narrowed. "That's what we're trying to figure out. Someone had access to your calendar." This revelation shifted something in my thinking. This wasn't just a rogue HOA overstepping its bounds. This was a calculated attack with inside information. I excused myself to check on the residents. In the conference room converted to a medical station, I found Elaine, the retired teacher, sitting quietly while a nurse checked her blood pressure. "How are you holding up?" I asked gently. "Better than some," she replied, her voice steadier than earlier. "But I keep thinking about what we've lost. Not just things but our home. We were a family there." Her words struck deep. The residents of Sunrise Haven weren't just people I helped. They had formed their own community, supporting each other through the challenges of aging. "We'll rebuild it," I promised. "Better than before." Elaine studied my face thoughtfully. "Someone said you're actually a senator. Is that true?" I nodded. "Yes, but that's not important right now." "It is important," she contradicted me with the directness only the elderly can master. "Because it means you have power. And power means responsibility." Her words echoed in my mind as I returned to the impromptu command center. My assistant handed me a phone. "The Attorney General," she whispered. As I took the call, I knew Elaine was right. I had power, not just to rebuild one elder care home, but potentially to change how vulnerable seniors were protected throughout the state. The HOA hadn't just bulldozed a building. They had awakened a legislator with first-hand experience of what needed to change. And they still had no idea who they were really dealing with. I spent the night at the hotel, moving between residents' rooms, ensuring everyone felt safe and had what they needed. By morning, my staff had constructed a detailed spreadsheet of each resident's medications, personal needs, and what had been lost in the demolition. The county prosecutor arrived early, looking sharp despite the hour. "We've filed initial charges," she reported, sipping coffee as we huddled in a quiet corner of the hotel restaurant. "Destruction of property, elder endangerment, document forgery, criminal trespass, and conspiracy to commit fraud." "What about Karen Maxwell's current status?" I asked. "Released on bail last night, but with strict conditions. No contact with any Sunrise Haven residents or staff, surrender of passport, and electronic monitoring." I nodded, unsurprised. "And the rest of the HOA board?" "We're interviewing them today. Most are claiming they didn't know about the forged documents or the timing. But those meeting minutes Sheriff Camden found suggest otherwise." My phone buzzed with a text from my legislative director. "Media requesting statement. Governor wants coordinated response. Committee meeting postponed until tomorrow." The reality of my dual responsibilities was setting in. I was both an advocate for these displaced seniors and a state senator with legislative duties. How I handled this situation could impact not just Sunrise Haven, but potentially elder care regulations statewide. "I need to make a public statement," I told the prosecutor. But I want to ensure it doesn't interfere with your case. She nodded. Just avoid specifics about evidence or charges. Focus on the humanitarian aspect and the needs of the residents. As we finished our conversation, I noticed several residents gathered in the hotel lobby, looking lost despite the comfortable surroundings. Their entire routine had been disrupted, their sense of home destroyed. I approached them, sitting down in an available armchair. How did everyone sleep? Strange dreams, said Harold, a former postal worker. Kept thinking I was back home, then waking up confused. My arthritis acts up in new places, added Dorothy, massaging her wrist. Took me 20 minutes to find the bathroom in the dark. Their concerns might seem small to outsiders, but I understood how disorienting this was, especially for seniors who relied on familiar environments and routines. We're going to visit the property today, I told them. See what can be salvaged. Do you have specific items you want us to look for? They all did: photo albums, heirloom jewelry, military service medals, handwritten recipes, irreplaceable mementos of lives long lived. I carefully noted each request, knowing many items would likely be damaged or destroyed, but determined to recover whatever possible. When I arrived back at the Sunrise Haven property, the scene was dramatically different from yesterday. Yellow police tape surrounded the perimeter. Insurance adjusters walked the grounds, taking photographs and measurements. A structural engineer was examining what remained of the building. About 40% destroyed before they stopped, the engineer reported, pointing to where the bulldozer had torn through the east wing. The remaining structure has significant damage. Not inhabitable. I walked carefully through the rubble with a recovery team, looking for residents' belongings. Each intact item felt like a small victory: a photo album with only minor water damage, a jewelry box still containing family heirlooms, a collection of handwritten letters tied with faded ribbon. Media vans lined the street, reporters watching from beyond the police tape. I had managed to avoid them so far, but knew a statement was inevitable. My phone rang, the governor himself. James, this is absolutely outrageous, he said, skipping any pleasantries. I've directed emergency management to prioritize this situation. What else do you need? Temporary housing is the immediate concern, I replied. The hotel works for now, but these seniors need a more home-like environment while we rebuild. I might have a solution. The state owns that former retreat center near Lakeside. It's been unused since the budget cuts, but it's furnished and wheelchair accessible. It was an excellent suggestion. A facility designed with older adults in mind, with private rooms yet common areas for meals and activities. The community could stay together. That could work perfectly, I agreed. How quickly could it be ready? I'll have a team there today. Could be operational by tomorrow. After ending the call, I found Sheriff Camden examining the bulldozer, which had been impounded as evidence. Found something interesting, he said, pointing to a document in an evidence bag. Work order for the demolition. It specifically mentioned waiting until the legislative session was underway. So they deliberately timed this when they thought I'd be unavailable, I concluded. Exactly. And there's more. We've been tracking the money. Karen Maxwell's husband's development company made a significant contribution to a certain county commissioner's re-election fund 3 weeks ago. The same commissioner who supposedly authorized this demolition? Camden nodded grimly. The very same. We're bringing him in for questioning this afternoon. The pieces were falling into place, revealing corruption more extensive than just an overzealous HOA. This was systematic, involving officials who should have been protecting citizens, not exploiting them. A reporter managed to approach, having somehow slipped past the police line. Senator Mitchell, can we get a statement about what happened here? Is it true you established this elder care home? The time for anonymity had ended. I straightened my shoulders and faced the camera directly. Yes, I founded Sunrise Haven 5 years ago to provide dignified, community-focused care for seniors who had no family support. Yesterday, it was illegally demolished by HOA officials using forged documents, endangering 12 elderly residents. This was not just a property dispute, it was a criminal act against some of our most vulnerable citizens. As I spoke, I could feel my dual roles as caregiver and senator merging into a single purpose. The HOA had bulldozed the wrong elder care home. They had attacked a mission protected by someone with the power to not only rebuild it, but to ensure such an attack could never happen again. The media coverage exploded overnight. By morning, national networks were running the story alongside local outlets. State Senator's elder care home illegally bulldozed. My phone didn't stop ringing with calls from colleagues, constituents, and elder advocacy groups across the country. What touched me most were the offers of help pouring in from ordinary citizens. Contractors volunteered services for rebuilding. Furniture stores offered donations. Pharmaceutical companies sent replacement medications. Local restaurants arranged meal deliveries to the hotel where the residents were temporarily staying. I arrived at the Lakeside Retreat Center just as moving vans were unloading donated clothes and necessities. The governor had kept his promise. The facility had been rapidly prepared for occupancy, with staff hired and supplies delivered in record time. "This is much better than the hotel," said Dorothy as I helped her settle into a cheerful room overlooking the lake. "Reminds me of where I used to vacation with my husband." I was showing Harold how to work the adjustable bed when my legislative director called with urgent news. "The county commissioner just resigned," she reported. "FBI has opened an investigation into the development contracts. They've seized computers and records from his office." "And the HOA board?" I asked. "Emergency meeting tonight. Word is they're voting to remove Karen Maxwell as president." Justice was moving swiftly, but for me the residents' well-being remained the priority. I spent hours ensuring everyone was comfortable in their temporary home, their medical needs addressed, and some sense of routine established. By evening, all 12 residents were settled into the retreat center. The head chef had prepared a special welcome dinner, and despite everything they'd endured, I saw smiles returning to familiar faces as they gathered around tables in the dining room. During dessert, Elaine tapped her glass with a spoon, calling for attention. "We want to thank Senator Mitchell," she announced, her voice strong despite her 84 years. "Not just for finding us this lovely place, but for creating Sunrise Haven in the first place. Many of us had nowhere else to go before he opened those doors." Murmurs of agreement circled the room. Harold added, "And we want you to know, Senator, that we're not just victims here. We're survivors. And we want to be part of whatever comes next." Their resilience moved me deeply. These weren't just displaced seniors. They were citizens with voice and agency, determined to reclaim their dignity. "Thank you," I said, standing to address them all. Sunrise Haven was always about creating community, not just housing. And that community is right here in this room, intact despite what happened. I hesitated, then decided they deserved complete transparency. "I'm planning to introduce legislation next week, a bill to protect elder care facilities from exactly this kind of action. Would any of you be willing to testify about your experience?" Hands raised around the room without hesitation. The next morning, I returned to the Capitol for the first time since the demolition. My colleagues greeted me with unprecedented support. Even senators who typically opposed my initiatives expressed outrage at what had happened. In my office, I found the governor waiting. "We need to make this right," he said. "Not just for your residents but for seniors statewide." Together, we drafted emergency legislation, the Elder Care Protection Act. It would create special zoning protections for senior living facilities, impose harsh penalties for endangering elderly residents, and establish a state fund to support displaced seniors in emergencies. The HOA's actions had inadvertently created momentum for reforms I'd been advocating for years. That afternoon, my phone rang with a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Senator Mitchell? This is Thomas Reynolds, Vice President of the Maple Creek Estates HOA." I braced myself for a confrontation, but his tone was conciliatory. "The board met last night. Karen Maxwell has been removed as president, effective immediately. He paused. "We want to formally apologize for what happened and offer whatever assistance we can with rebuilding." "That's a start," I replied carefully. "But 12 elderly people lost their home, their possessions, and their sense of security. An apology doesn't rebuild what was destroyed." "We understand." The board has voted unanimously to contribute $500,000 from our community fund toward reconstruction costs. "It's not enough, but it's what we can do immediately." I was momentarily speechless. This was unexpected and significant. "Thank you," I finally said. "I'll discuss this with the residents. It's ultimately their home that was destroyed." When I shared the news with the seniors that evening, their reactions were mixed. Some remained angry, others saw it as a meaningful gesture. "Use it to build a bigger library," suggested Harold. "I always said we needed more books." "And wider doorways for wheelchairs," added Dorothy. They were already imagining their new home, looking forward rather than back. Their resilience continued to inspire me. The preliminary hearing for Karen Maxwell was scheduled for the following week. The prosecutor called to brief me on developments. "She's seeking a plea deal," she informed me, offering to testify against her husband and the county commissioner about the development scheme. What are you recommending? Limited immunity in exchange for full cooperation. Her testimony could help us dismantle a corruption network that goes beyond just this incident. I thought of the residents who had lost irreplaceable mementos and the trauma they had endured. As long as she still faces consequences for the harm caused to the residents. Absolutely. We won't compromise on that. By now, 3 weeks had passed since the demolition. Architectural plans for a new, improved Sunrise Haven were taking shape, incorporating suggestions from residents and modern accessibility features. Construction companies were competing to offer the fastest timeline. What had begun as a tragedy was transforming into an opportunity, not just to rebuild one facility, but to change how we protected vulnerable seniors throughout the state. The HOA had bulldozed the wrong elder care home. In doing so, they had awakened not just the state senator's outrage, but his determination to create lasting change. 6 months after the demolition, I stood with a pair of oversized ceremonial scissors before a red ribbon stretched across the entrance of the new Sunrise Haven elder community. What had once been a modest care home was now a state-of-the-art senior living facility with expanded capacity, modern amenities, and innovative design. The residents, dressed in their finest clothes, gathered around me for the ribbon cutting. They had been integral to every phase of planning and construction, their input shaping everything from the layout of common areas to the colors of the walls. This isn't just a rebuilding, I announced to the crowd of community members, media, and government officials. This is a rebirth. What was meant to destroy these seniors' home instead created something stronger, better, and protected by the full force of state law. Behind me stood the new facility, its architecture warm and inviting yet clearly modern. Solar panels lined the roof, gardens surrounded the property, and wide pathways accommodated wheelchairs and walkers with ease. The building was nearly twice the size of the original, with room for 10 additional residents who had already been selected from a waiting list. As I cut the ribbon, cheers erupted from the crowd. Elaine, now appointed as the residents' official spokesperson, stepped forward to address the gathering. 6 months ago we watched our home being destroyed, she said, her voice strong and clear. Today we're not just moving into a new building. We're celebrating a community that refused to be broken. Inside, the transformation was even more remarkable. The common areas featured large windows overlooking landscaped gardens. A library twice the size Harold had requested was stocked with books donated by local schools and bookstores. A therapy room contained equipment for physical rehabilitation. Most meaningful was the memory wall in the main hall, a collection of photographs and mementos salvaged from the demolition, preserved as a reminder of resilience. The legislation born from this incident, now officially named the Senior Protection and Community Care Act, had passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. It established unprecedented protections for elder care facilities and created a rapid response system for seniors displaced in emergencies. 3 neighboring states had already begun drafting similar legislation based on our model. Karen Maxwell had ultimately served 3 months in jail followed by 2 years of probation and community service requirements. Her husband faced more serious charges related to corruption and bribery. The county commissioner was awaiting trial on multiple federal charges. The HOA had been completely restructured, with new leadership and amended bylaws that explicitly recognized Sunrise Haven's protected status. Their financial contribution had funded the facility's new medical center, ironically named the Reconciliation Wing. As residents explored their new home, I found myself standing alone in the garden, reflecting on the journey of the past half year. What had begun as a personal project honoring my parents had evolved into something far more significant. A model for elder care that emphasized community, dignity, and protection under law. The bulldozers that had torn through the original building had unwittingly broken ground on a movement that was now spreading across the state and beyond. Dorothy approached, using her new walker decorated with colorful streamers by local schoolchildren. "Admiring your handiwork, Senator?" I smiled. "Our handiwork. This was built by all of us." "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about what happened. That HOA president thought she was just dealing with some troublesome old folks and a building that didn't fit her idea of proper development. She had no idea she was taking on a state senator." "That's true," I acknowledged. "But more importantly," Dorothy continued, her eyes sharp with wisdom, "she had no idea she was taking on seniors who weren't ready to be discarded, who still had purpose and voice. That was her bigger mistake." Her words struck me profoundly. The true story wasn't just about a politician using his power to right a wrong. It was about elderly citizens insisting on their right to dignity, community, and respect. That evening, as residents gathered for their first dinner in the new dining room, I watched them sharing stories, laughing and planning activities in their new home. They had lost possessions in the demolition, but what remained unbreakable was their spirit and the bonds between them. The HOA had indeed bulldozed the wrong elder care home. They had attacked a facility protected not just by a state senator, but by a community's determination to stand together against those who would dismiss the elderly as irrelevant. As I prepared to leave, Harold caught my arm. "You're coming for chess on Thursday, right? Just because we have this fancy new place doesn't mean we're changing our routines." I smiled. I wouldn't miss it. Some things were meant to remain exactly as they were, the humanity and connection at the heart of what made Sunrise Haven not just a building but a home. As the one-year anniversary of the demolition approached, I invited the residents to the state capitol. They arrived in a specially equipped bus, excitement evident on their faces as they toured the historic building where laws were crafted and debated. In the main chamber, I introduced them to my colleagues. These are the citizens whose courage and resilience inspired the most comprehensive elder protection legislation in our state's history. The senators rose in a standing ovation. Elaine wiped away tears, while Harold proudly straightened his veteran's cap. They weren't just visitors, they were honored guests whose lived experience had shaped public policy. Later that day, we gathered in the governor's office for a private ceremony. He presented each resident with a special commendation for civic contribution. "Your story changed how we think about elder care in this state," the governor told them. "Sometimes the most powerful advocacy comes from those society too often ignores." Dorothy, now a regular speaker at senior advocacy events, nodded in agreement. "We never asked to become activists," she said. "We just wanted to keep our home. But when that was threatened, we discovered voices we didn't know we had." Back at the new Sunrise Haven, life had settled into comfortable rhythms. The facility had become a model studied by elder care professionals from across the country. Its unique governance structure, where residents participated in decision-making through an elected council, had proven particularly innovative. The waiting list for residency had grown to over 50 names. We were already discussing potential expansion, perhaps creating a network of small, community-focused homes rather than one large institution. One evening, as I visited for our weekly chess game with Harold, I found him in the garden with a familiar and unexpected visitor, Karen Maxwell, completing her community service hours by tending the residents' vegetable garden. Their interaction wasn't warm, but it was civil. The justice system had worked as intended, not just punishing wrongdoing but creating opportunities for understanding and reparation. "She's actually quite knowledgeable about heirloom tomatoes," Harold admitted grudgingly as we set up the chessboard. "Still won't look me in the eye though." Perhaps the most meaningful outcome was how the incident had changed me as a legislator. Every bill I now considered was viewed through the lens of how it would affect the most vulnerable citizens, those whose voices were often unheard in marble halls of power. The HOA had bulldozed the wrong elder care home. They had unwittingly created a powerful alliance between a state senator with legislative influence and elderly citizens with moral authority. Together, we had not only rebuilt a physical structure but had constructed something far more durable. A new framework for protecting the dignity and community of our elders. As Elaine often said during her testimony to legislative committees, "We may be in the winter of our lives, but we still have seeds to plant for springs we may not see." The bulldozers had demolished walls, but they had failed to touch what truly mattered: the human bonds that form Sunrise Haven's foundation, and the determination of people at any age to stand up for their right to community, dignity, and home.